Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for how to deliver value and avoid frustration with your quarterly business reviews. I am Mathilde Augustin and I work at Amity as a marketing analyst. And we're really excited to have James Scott today from CSM Practice, who will be sharing his incredible expertise about the topic. So just a couple of housekeeping notes before we begin. Feel free to tweet us and join the conversation online with the hashtag QBRSuccess. Feel free to mention Amity or CSM Practice as well. We'll also be sending the slides in the next 24 hours. And we will do a Q&A session at the end. So at any time, feel free to write your questions in the chat box at the bottom left screen, and James Scott will be answering the questions at the end of the webinar. So now I'd like to introduce James.
Great, thank you very much. Hello everyone, it's great to be here. I realized this morning as I was just getting ready for this webinar that we're actually competing head-on with the Apple annual event in San Francisco where they make all sorts of exciting product announcements. So first of all, thank you so much for coming along to the webinar today. If any of you are here thinking that this is the Apple event, I'm afraid you're in the wrong place. I also asked Tim Cook over at Apple to make the same announcement at the start of the Apple keynote. So hopefully if there's anyone over there that actually thought they should be in the QBR webinar, they'll be on their way over here very shortly. So with that said, let's get started. We have got a whole load of stuff to talk about today. The way I like to do webinars is to cram a lot of value in. That means we tend to move through things quite fast. But the good news is this is all being recorded and you can go back and refer to things afterwards and hopefully fill in any blanks that you missed. I do encourage you to take notes though. It's a great way of getting things to sink in and kind of making sure you have actions that you can follow up on after the webinar's over. So first of all, we're going to do a quick exercise to see whether, everyone on the call, can you tell me whether you have ever done a QBR? And maybe if you could see the chat box in the bottom of the screen, if you post in there whether you have ever done a QBR, we'll just take 20 seconds to see what the kind of overall consensus is amongst the people on the call today. Yep, as I saw, it looks like about 90% of people have done a QBR before, which is kind of what I expected, so that's great. So let me ask you a follow-up question. For those of you who have done a QBR, were you happy with the impact it had on adoption, upsell, overall client success, and advocacy? Again, post your answer in the chat box. Were you happy with the impact that your QBR had on some of these key things? Well, so now the answers are not quite so positive. It looks like it's probably 50-50. A lot of people saying some of the time, yes, it could have been a bit better. Didn't really kind of necessarily achieve what I wanted to achieve. And that's exactly why we're here today, because I think QBRs are an extremely powerful mechanism for customer success teams, but often they don't go great. And what we want to do is to talk today about what is QBR, what are some of the things that often go wrong in QBRs, and then I want to talk about how we should be, give you some sort of an analogy that helps you think about what role a QBR should play in your relationship with your customer. And then to help you kind of then take action, we're going to talk about a 4-phase QBR playbook that the team here at CSM Practice has kind of built up over the last 3 years through talking with lots of different clients. And it's kind of a playbook that we then have templatized and use, we share with clients that we work with. And so I'm going to give you a glimpse into that today and also talk about 3 magical slides that you should include in every QBR. So that's a little bit of value that you can take away and start using straight away. And then we'll wrap up with some QBR golden rules and key takeaways and sort of resources for you to follow up on after the webinar. And please, I encourage you to be active in the chat box, but also active on social media as well. And if you learn something that you think is valuable, please do share it on Twitter or whatever social media network you like. Okay, so you're in the right webinar. if you want to create a highly engaging QBR session where the decision makers hang on every value-soaked word that spills from your lips. That's what we're doing today. Okay, so first of all, question, what is a QBR? Well, stands for Quarterly Business Review. And it's basically something that happens on a regular basis. It's scheduled up front. It doesn't always happen quarterly, despite the name, and we'll come back to that a bit later in the webinar. So essentially, it's a meeting, and it's often takes place in person, but not always. It can be remote, phone-based. It has a more strategic focus. Okay, so it's more strategic than tactical. And as a result, the people you want in the room are kind of the key stakeholders, both from your side, from the company side, but also from the customer side as well. So, that sounds pretty obvious. So what can possibly go wrong with a QBR? Well, quite a lot of things often go wrong. And a couple of weeks ago, I asked on Twitter and asked some of my followers, what were the things that often went wrong in their QBRs? And I put together a list of the top 8 things, sort of top 8 themes that they came back with. So I'll let you read through these. I suspect you'll kind of nod your head at a lot of them. Maybe these are things that have happened to you in some of your QBRs in the past. Maybe they're things that keep happening, and you don't kind of see a path to addressing it. Like, how do you get past some of these? Well, the good news is we're going to talk about today a framework that will allow you to make sure none of these things happen in your QBRs. Okay? Great. Well, let's move on. So let's now move on to thinking about what a QBR should be. How should you be thinking about a quarterly business review? And I think, the key question, before we talk about what actually happens in a QBR, we need to think about what the goal is. What are you trying to achieve with a QBR? And this is a question that often when I ask people, when I ask CSMs or leaders of customer success organizations, I'll get answers like, well, it's good to get face time with customers. It's good to kind of have an opportunity to talk for a couple of hours without distractions. It's quality time. It helps build trust in the relationship and rapport. Yes, it does do all of those things if you do a good QBR, and they are all great outcomes. But I'd argue they're secondary outcomes. What is the primary goal of a QBR? And this is what often people don't clearly articulate when I ask that question. And the way I explain it is I use an analogy. I call it the road trip analogy. So what we're going to do now is imagine we're going on a road trip. Okay? And here's where we're going. We're going to start in San Francisco, which is where I am today on the West Coast. And we are going to drive all the way to Philadelphia, which is another city close to my heart. I grew up there. I spent time there when I was growing up, and it's a lovely city. I put a cheesesteak there. That's not in any way to say that's all Philadelphia is about, but I do love Philly cheesesteaks. So we're going on a road trip. It's nearly 3,000 miles. We're going to start in San Francisco, get in our car, and we're going to drive. We're going to go through Sacramento, Salt Lake City, Omaha, Chicago, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, end up in Philadelphia. Okay? So that's quite a journey. Now, I would hope that on that journey, there are certain things that you should know. If you are driving or navigating, you're in that car, there's certain things you should know about your progress on that journey, right? There are 4 things. Number 1, your current location. Where are you right at that moment on this journey? Number 2, what is the next major city on your route? And if we think about cities as kind of milestones, right? You don't drive as the crow flies directly from San Francisco to Philadelphia. You go via a certain route that has milestones along it. And in this case, the milestones are cities. So you've got to go through Sacramento and Salt Lake and Chicago, etc. So what's the next major city that you're aiming for? Third point, what direction are you heading? Now this is pretty important, right? Are you Are you driving in the direction towards that next milestone, that next city? If not, you're not going to get there, right? So that's pretty important. And then fourth, what do you need to do to ensure you make it to the next city? So other than driving in the right direction, what are the other things that you're going to need along the way, right? So you might need to stop for restroom breaks. You might need to, well, you will need to fill up with gas, get more fuel in the car. Maybe you need to check the tires, check they're inflated at certain points because, it's a long trip. So these are four things that you should know at any point on this road trip. And I would suggest they're good things to discuss each time you take a pit stop. Each time you stop the car to do one of these things, you should kind of revisit where you are, where you're heading to, are you going the right way, and what do you need, what's kind of be the next thing that you need on your journey. Okay? So that's the road trip. And I think you can probably see where I'm going with this. Your customer has a very similar journey. Your customer's road trip starts with the start of their relationship with you. And obviously it starts way before that if they're an existing company, but we're going to focus on when they start their relationship with you. And they have a desired outcome. They have something they're aiming for in the future. And that may be, an acquisition, it may be an IPO, it may be, certain revenue goals, whatever the outcomes are for your customers, and they will be different from customer to customer. They have a desired outcome, right? So I would argue that in the same way as the road trip, there are four things you should know. And your customer should understand about their own journey, right? Where are they on that journey? What is the next major milestone that they're going to hit as a business? Are they doing the right things to get to that milestone? Right? If they carry on doing what they're doing, is it reasonable to assume that they are going to get to that milestone? And this is a concept that there's a great customer success guy called Lincoln Murphy who came up with this concept of success vector, which is basically saying, how do you define whether a customer is indeed going in the right direction? And think of it as a vector. Are they exhibiting behaviors? Are they doing things that they need to do that will give you reasonable confidence they will get to that next milestone? And then the last one is what help do they need from you to help them get there? And that may be product-based help, so it may be they need to buy more products from you. It may be they need to buy services from you. It may be they need you to introduce them to a partner, somebody that can, in your network, in your ecosystem, that can add value and help them get to that next milestone. But there'll be things that they need from you. And if you do this right, and these things are often called kind of upsell or cross-sell, right? And if you do things right, you can plan this out with your customer. So by the time that they actually get to the point of needing that thing, it's very clear to them that they need it, right? You've kind of prepared them for the fact that in 3 months or 6 months, they're going to need this new product and they're going to need to buy some consultancy. And so it becomes very easy then to close that upsell with the customer. It doesn't feel like a sales effort. It's just a natural thing that they need. It's a tool they need to help them on their journey. And then lastly, so you've got these four things. So then you need to think about when you're going to discuss them. And this is, for me, what the QBR is all about. It is the point in time where you sit down with the key stakeholders in your customer's company and talk about where they are on their journey, what the next milestone is, are they doing the right things, and how can you help them get there. That is the goal of a QBR. Okay, so if you want me to just kind of put this another way, be their goose, okay? Be their wingman. So we have this I can't take credit for this. I have a colleague who came up with this terminology, and he's based in the UK. Actually, in the UK, what we call a sort of a repair technician who works on your central heating or your boiler. It's called a boiler man. That's the phrase. So are you going to be your customer's wingman or their boiler man? And a wingman is somebody who is strategic in a relationship, right? They're there with you, helping you make decisions, that they're a partner. They are somebody you lean on for advice. They're somebody you trust, you trust with your business. The alternative is you're a boiler man, which means you tend to be more of a tool provider or a service provider, somebody they kind of just ring up and tell what you tell. They just tell you what they want and they expect you to give it to them. You're not helping them make decisions about what they need. And so, in an ideal relationship, you want to be a wingman. Because if you're a wingman and you're trusted, then they will help. They will ask you what they need to be doing next, and you can tell them. And then, they're far more likely to be successful if they're helping them strategically. So be their goose is my motto, be their goose. Okay, so we've talked about what the goal is for the QBR. How do we make your QBRs great again? You've told me about all these issues you have. Let's talk about how we make them great again. So first of all, stop calling them QBRs and start calling them EBRs, Executive Business Reviews. And this is a really serious point. These should be executive level meetings. These are not tactical, these are strategic. So by putting the word executive in the name of the meeting itself, you are setting that bar. You're making it abundantly clear to your customers of what sort of level of engagement this meeting is. So it's a really simple thing to do. It also gets away from this kind of quarterly thing, which 9 times out of 10 does not happen reliably on a quarterly basis. For some customers, it may be a monthly meeting. Other customers, it may be once a year. So call it an executive business review, set the right bar in terms of who's in the meeting, and then you can also kind of choose the frequency of the meeting based on your client segments. Your most valuable clients you probably want to meet with more often than your less valuable clients. And then secondly, EBRs, as I now will refer to them for the rest of this presentation, do not become great on their own. To get great results from your EBRs, the secret is to turn the one-off good ones that you do into a repeatable playbook. Okay? So it's not taking it by chance. It's not the success shouldn't be based on the individual CSM's own, it shouldn't be 100% based on how good the CSM is at doing QBRs. There should be a playbook that the whole team can use that gives structure and format and gives a much higher probability that the EBR will be successful for the customer. So the secret is to come up with your own playbook that works for your business, and then you've got a repeatable, consistent way of delivering these meetings. So at CSM Practice, which is we're a consultancy practice based in San Francisco, and we work with lots of companies, lots of different sizes, to talk to them about various aspects of customer success. One of the things we work on a lot is playbooks. And we've kind of got this 4-phase tried and tested approach where we break down the QBR into 4 phases: the planning phase, the pre-EBR, the live EBR, and the post-EBR. And here's what's in each stage. So the planning phase is it's all the work you do kind of before the EBR. It's the preparation work you do before the actual meeting itself. How can you create an EBR that promotes value like crazy? And this is where those 3 measurable slides come in, and I'm going to talk about those in a second. The pre-EBR phase is what happens this is kind of lining up the key stakeholders and making sure that they attend the meeting. So how to fill up your EBR with above-the-line stakeholders. Because you can have the best content, the best plan, playbook, but if you get in the room and you haven't got the right people in the room, you're not going to get the same outcomes, either for you or for your client. So it's really important that you get the above-the-line stakeholders in the meeting, not just the people who are in the kind of weeds of the software every day, but the people who are making the kind of more strategic decisions on the behalf of the company. Then you've got the live EBR stage, where this is all about the actual meeting itself, whether it's 1 hour or 2 hours, whatever it might be. How do you create that engagement with the client? How do you really maximize the use of that time so that you're not just sitting there for 2 hours answering support ticket questions or getting moaned at about a bug that's caused them some problems? How do you really get an engaging meeting that creates trust and affinity to your brand and sets up a great post-EBR phase, which is ultimately where most of the value is created. And it's crazy how many people skip this phase, right? They do the meeting, they kind of, then get back to the office and life takes over again, and they don't ever really do a good follow-up. But actually, post-EBR, you can double the value of your EBR just by the actions you take in the days and weeks afterwards. So we're going to talk about that again in a second. All right, so planning phase. Designing an EBR slide deck that promotes value like crazy. This is where we are going to talk about the 3 magical slides. I want you to pay very close attention to this. And, these are 3 slides that, if you haven't got them already, you should put them in your very next EBR. Okay? They're that good. All right. So slide number 1. We call this the sweeten the experience slide. So basically, this slide is going to give them a big reason to want to attend not only this EBR, but also the next one, and the one after that, and the one after that. And what you're doing here is telling them something that they don't know, something that can help them either save money or make money. So, what I mean by this, if you think about it, you've got key stakeholders in your meeting, and, what you're trying to do is get these stakeholders to show up every time and to feel like the meeting is worth their time, right? So part of that is speaking strategically about how you can work with them, but part of it is just turning up with these little kind of nuggets of useful information that they're kind of excited to hear from you. And a great example of this would be looking at their usage of the product and proactively identifying some things that they could do, like within a matter of hours, to extract some additional value that will make them more money or save them money. In my experience, a lot of companies don't have great access to usage data. They don't have it in a format that necessarily makes it accessible to the customer through the UI in terms of working out how they can, what behaviors, giving them actionable insights that they can take action to save money or make money within the user interface itself. But often, when you're back at the office, you have access to more granular data. You can export data. You can kind of manipulate it behind the scenes and then present it in a way that can be really powerful. If you can give them something like that, they get immediate value. They learn something, and they can save money and make money. They're going to come back again and again to your QBRs. Slide number 2, creating a sense of accountability. So what you're trying to do here is create this aha moment for your client when you encourage them to take some accountability for their progress. And the best way to do this is to create a customer scoring model and give them a score. Because you're basically benchmarking them against other customers in a similar life cycle stage to them who are using your product. You're giving them a very kind of quantitative score about how they are doing. And, everybody, when they see a score, they're like, well, I want that score to be higher, right? Where am I scoring low? And it gets them involved in just, working with you to come up with a roadmap that helps them improve their score. Okay, and how you actually construct this individual model itself will vary a lot based on your own business and what you're trying to achieve with your customers. But, get them bought in, get those competitive juices flowing, get them kind of feeling responsible themselves for the outcome. Okay, so that's the slide number 2. And then slide number 3 is really, this is a big one, but it really is the foundation to everything else that you'll be doing with this customer over the lifetime that they're with you. So you've got to kind of help them see what else they can get, right? So this may be a series of slides. It may not be one slide. But essentially what you're laying the foundation for a success plan. You're describing their current situation. You're describing what their challenges are. You're playing back to them the top priorities that they have as a business. You've got put some KPIs in there that helps them measure how they're doing and their impact. And then you're laying out some options for them in terms of how they go forward and what those benefits will be of different options, whether it's buying another product from you or increasing their usage or buying some services or whatever it might be. You're laying out those benefits. And this becomes a living, breathing document that kind of just gets updated every time that you have a meeting with them. And I'd say, one of the most powerful things to do here is work your champion internally in your customer side to complete this slide. So this isn't something that you kind of do after the meeting. You need to do this before the meeting. You need to go into that meeting and present them with all this information about their business. And then, imagine how powerful that is. They're like, whoa, you really understand my business. You understand where I'm at, my challenges, my priorities, and you've given me some options about how I could go forward. Now, you will update this, I'm sure, after the meeting, right, based on new information that comes up and the discussions that happen. But work with your kind of the person within your customer's company who you've got the best relationship with, who's kind of the biggest champion for your product. Work with them in advance of the EBR to prepare this slide or collection of slides. And this will be so powerful then when you sit down and there's an executive in the room from your customer's company and they see this laid out in front of them. It will guarantee to impress them. Okay. So those were the magical slides. Now let's talk about how to fill up your meeting with above-the-line stakeholders. Okay? And these are strategies, this kind of, these are, may seem obvious, but it's amazing how many times they're skipped. So, first of all, I'm going to send them a really clear email about what is in it for them. Define what's in it for them. Okay? Because the reality is that a lot of executives, for example, won't see a benefit in coming to a meeting with a customer success manager who's not at their level, right? So typically, let's say you've got, if you've got two companies of roughly the same size and you want to get their VP in the room, you might need to actually bring your own VP to the meeting, or if you're a VP, you might need to be at that meeting. Okay, so if you're roughly the same size, you kind of match who you have in the room with who you expect to come in from their side. You don't have to do that every time because that's not scalable, but certainly do it on a some sort of regular basis because it shows that there is somebody of the same kind of seniority within your company that is caring about them as a customer. So send them an invitation. Try and get executive alignment with kind of who's in the room. Get it as close as possible aligned. And just spell out what the benefits are of this meeting, right? Not the benefits of your solution, right? That's not the point. The point here is to get into the meeting. So you need to sell the benefits and the value of the meeting. And it's always good to lay out a clear agenda in this meeting, right? Because there's nothing worse than kind of a woolly email that sounds like you're just all going to sit around chatting and drinking coffee for 2 hours. Let's have some really clear bullet-pointed agenda topics that you are going to go through. So it's really clear that there's a lot in it for the person that's been invited, and they need to make invest the time to come along. Okay, so now you actually get to the EBR itself, right? So how do we make sure that we get this precious 2 hours or hour of time, how do we make sure it's as valuable as possible? And, this is where a lot of things go wrong, right? So maybe you have an agenda that you've set out, but you haven't kind of shared it in advance with the customer, so they come in with different expectations, and you end up kind of just being bombarded with questions about functionality or complaints about issues. So, there are certainly things you need to do in advance, but actually when you're in the meeting as well, how can you make sure that everybody gets the most out of it? And so one of the things that I kind of like to remind myself, and I encourage you guys to do the same, is no matter whether they buy into everything you discuss or not, right? They may not choose to take up every one of your recommendations, buy every one of your products that you've recommended to them, or take the next steps, every one of the next steps you've recommended. Hopefully they'll take most of it, but make sure that they walk away feeling inspired, right? Excited. Make sure that, so they feel driven to take action. You just kind of really want to make it clear to them that you're there to support them, and no matter what, you want them to get really excited about the opportunities that you're presenting them, how they can apply those to their business. And if you're kind of in that state of mind when you go in, that energy will be picked up by the customer, and they'll go into a more of a proactive, kind of inspirational, like, what can we achieve together type of mindset, rather than the what can I get from you type of mindset, which often they're in. Okay? The other thing that is often missing in QBRs, EBRs, is this engagement piece. So, often these meetings can be a little bit stressful, right? Because maybe you've not been face-to-face before with this customer or for a while. Maybe, there's some things they're not 100% happy about, but so you're a little worried about that going in, and you put all this work in to prepare the agenda and the presentations and whatever else you're going to be sharing with them. And then you kind of get kind of so excited and so kind of, focused on the job that maybe you end up talking too much. Maybe you just don't, you don't remember to take that pause and to create engagement with the customer. And that's, so many times I've kind of witnessed EBRs where, a CSM who maybe is less experienced has just basically told the customer a lot of things about their business, and thought that would be kind of really impressive. But actually, yes, you need to demonstrate that you understand their business, but you also need to create engagement where they can come back to you and give you information. That information is what's going to help you update the success plan and sort of define the relationship going forward. So a little tip is, if you are one of those people maybe that kind of gets in the zone and then you kind of forget to ask a bunch of things, build the engagement piece into the agenda, and build it into the meeting structure, so you can't kind of forget it. Like, put specific points where you're asking them questions, where there's information you need from them, and by asking these questions about their current situation and their challenges and all this good stuff, you will create value. And it's interesting, and this was a lesson for me, I must say. Again, it feels kind of obvious when you speak it out, but it doesn't happen all the time. And that is, if you're curious, if you ask a lot of questions, and you don't just get information, right, that you can write down and put into a document somewhere. If you ask good questions, you ask discovery questions and good discovery questions, you get your customer thinking about things that maybe they haven't thought about before, or maybe they haven't thought about for a while, because you've asked them a good question and they've got to kind of pause and think, oh, it's a really good question, I've got to think about that. And they will start thinking, and as they think, they will naturally, that feels valuable to them, right? Because you've asked a good question and forced them to think about it. That's the perception of value. Then often, as a result of that, they will start giving you, answers, and maybe you start discussing the individual questions in a bit more depth and come up with suggestions for them. And you can actually deliver real value back, actually then and there in the meeting. Actually realize real value in the meeting because you've asked them good discovery questions. So always be curious. Always kind of, don't take everything they say at face value. Often you'll get a customer tell you they need something, they need X from you. Why? What is it you're trying to achieve with that? Oh, I need to do this. Why do you need to do that? Keep asking why and try and peel back the onion and get to kind of the core of what it is that they are concerned about, what they're looking to achieve. and then you can have a discussion around it and you'll create value. So lots of questions, really, really important. Okay, then finally, the post-EBR phase. So how to double your customer's engagement after the EBR has ended. Now, obviously, this is all about the follow-up, right? It's about actionable follow-up. And there's all sorts of ways to do this, but generally you kind of want to share some sort of summary of the meeting pretty quickly with attendees. Then you want some action items with owners and timelines. And then there's the success plan itself, right? So updating the actual plan, the roadmap that you have laid out and any tweaks that you've made as a result of the conversation. So, the meeting summary, here's, just an example, email format, but something that's very, very clear, sort of the key things that were discussed. Doesn't have to go into a ton of detail in the summary. It is a summary after all, but what are the key points that were discussed, the key decisions made? Maybe if you've recorded the meeting, you share that and send that email out to the people that were present, of course, but also anyone else that you think or you've identified that maybe have find the content useful. And so that's a great way then of kind of internally marketing the value you've provided, as well as giving the people present something tangible. And they don't, it sits in their inbox and kind of reminds them that they've had the meeting and there's some stuff to do. Create a really clear, detailed action items list. So you should come out of this meeting, out of the EBR with actions. And the actions should have owners, and the owners should have time deadlines to deliver those actions. And there'll be actions both on your side, but also on the customer side. And it's up to you to, follow up on those actions, try and hold your customer accountable. But, if you've done some of this other stuff we talked about right, the customer should be sufficiently motivated and energized to, be accountable for their own actions. You shouldn't be needing to chase them down. But the most important thing is you actually write those actions down in a very simple format where they can quickly refer back to them, not have to kind of dig back through a 2-hour recording to remember what they were. And ideally these things are going out within hours, or certainly within a day or two to meet the EBR itself. And then the last, probably biggest step is to kind of create or update your account success plan. So what you're going to be doing here is just, and this is just a illustration of a very simple summary table, but success plans can be much more, and often are much more detailed documents. But essentially what you're doing is, during the meeting, or based on what was discussed during the meeting, there'll be some recommendations or some paths that the customer can take. So going back to our road trip analogy, let's say they're in Sacramento and they need to get to Salt Lake. Well, maybe Route 80 is the obvious route, but there may be 2 or 3 options for them. And you kind of want to lay those out. And each option might have different costs, different time frames, different risks, different, slightly different kind of people required maybe. So, lay out some options for them, help them kind of summarize that, agree which one you're going to take, and then that's something then you can come back and revisit at the next EBR, bring up the success plan. Here, how are you doing? This is the journey you picked, the path you picked last time we met, and where are we along that path? And actually, in reality, you're probably going to check in between EBRs as well, but the EBR is certainly a place to update the success plan. And with all these things, I wouldn't say create unnecessary urgency, but the sooner your customer get actions completed or take the steps that are required that you've identified with them that will make them successful, the quicker they'll be successful, right? So it's part of your job is to help the customer, remind the customer, in the weeks and months after the EBR, help try and keep those energy levels high, right? Remind them of why this is a good thing that they chose to do. Remind them that they wanted to try and get there within 3 months, and now you're in month 4, and maybe they need to prioritize it a bit higher. create a kind of a sense of urgency without making it kind of annoying. Give the customer, the customer's competitors will be doing their own journey, and the quicker your customer can move through their steps, the more quickly they'll be successful. Okay, so that was a very, very quick run through of the 4-level plan. I would love to talk in more detail about it with anybody that would like to delve deeper, but time obviously isn't our friend today. So that was a very high-level run through. Hopefully it gave you some ideas and was useful. I'd love to know what you think. Post it in the chat box if you can. Just kind of, was it useful? Which bits do you like the most? Were there any particular pieces of value that came from that you think you can implement straight away in your own businesses? It's so important to get this right. It's such a relatively big portion of time that you're dedicating to this meeting. So just invest that little bit up front and afterwards to make sure that you extract as much value as possible. And by the way, nothing I've shared with you today is theory, right? These are, yes, I'm a customer success consultant, but prior to that, I ran customer success teams, as did my colleagues at CSM Practice. We've worked with lots of companies. These are strategies that are being used by other teams to maximize the value of their customer base. And what we've done is just kind of consolidated them and made them a little bit more easy to digest. But it's not theory. This is all real stuff that's happening today, and there are things that you can definitely do yourself in your own companies. And if you get it right and design your playbook for your company, you will increase adoption, upsell, expansion revenue, you will increase advocacy, you will improve retention, and you'll provide that consistency that I talked about earlier on across your team in how EBRs are delivered. So it's not kind of random, or it's not skewed based on the individual that's delivering it. It becomes more of a methodology for delivering EBRs. It's a playbook that helps everybody be consistent. So now it's time for you to go away and create or update your own playbook. As you're doing so, I just put here some golden rules to remember. If you do these things, if you take the time to prepare, if you focus on understanding that customer journey, you set clear expectations up front, you create meaningful engagement during the meeting, you agree clear actions at the end of the meeting, and then you share accountability for follow-up. If you can achieve all these things with your playbook, then you're doing great, and it will lead to alignment between you and your customer, which will build trust and confidence. You'll actually see progress, real good progress, and customers will reach their desired outcomes sooner. So it's your job to work this stuff out. It's fun to do, and it won't be easy. You'll make mistakes, and you'll have to constantly refine your playbook along the way. But if you can get it right, then it's a powerful pit stop on the customer's journey towards their desired outcomes. And if you get it wrong, it actually has a negative effect. It can cause frustration for the clients, disruption for your own business as you kind of all the work you're doing and then getting no value out of it. So, my key takeaway is to create your own 4-phase playbook and remember those golden rules. And take action today. Don't delay. If you want a little bit more info, you can go to our blog and download a QBR checklist, or reach out to me. My email's on the screen here. I'll be happy to schedule some time and talk through kind of where you're at with your own playbook and kind of what you think you need to do to move it to the next level. We'd love to talk. We can help both at a strategic level, but also we can actually create playbooks for you and even build them into your customer success software as well, and actually help your team follow the playbooks on a consistent basis. So thank you very much. And at this point, I would like to open up to questions. Okay, I'm just seeing a number of questions coming through. So just give me a moment to pick out some good ones. From Corey, is there a recommended number of slides for an EBR? Good question. No, there's not a clear recommendation, but if you think about kind of think about the things that I've talked about today that you need to cover. You need to then kind of do a little bit of a internal process about kind of what is your customer value, right? If you've got customers who are worth, their annual contract value is, $100,000, then your EBR is probably going to look very different to one that is maybe $10,000. So, no, there is not one answer to the number of slides. What I'd encourage you to do, though, is to think about how to incorporate each of the elements I've talked about today into your EBR playbook, and then think about how that maybe looks slightly different for different segments of customers. And you're probably going to have a lot more detailed and bigger slide deck for the bigger customers. Lots of questions are coming in so far, so I'm halfway through reading one and it scrolls off the screen. This is great. Let's see. Okay, how do you handle upset clients? A good one from Laura. How do you handle upset clients that only want to discuss proven items and issues? Oh boy, we've all been in those meetings, right? Sometimes we know they're coming, sometimes we don't, and we get the hairdryer effect across the table, and kind of suddenly all your plans go out of the window for what you thought you were going to cover in the meeting. We've all been there. I think the key here is this preparation piece and the engagement with the champion beforehand. The more of that engagement that happens, the less surprises there should be, first of all. So if the client has a lot of issues, you kind of want to know about it going into the meeting and not be surprised by it during the meeting when the CEO steps in and suddenly, hair dries you. So that's one part of it. But for the customers that are actually genuinely frustrated or upset, I think if they are that upset, then there is a delicate balance, right? You can't ignore their issues because you can talk strategy as much as you want. In their minds, they'll keep going back to, but this bug, but this issue, and I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to think about that until these are resolved. I think you need to build those sort of things into your plan. And just be really transparent and acknowledge them, accept them, apologize for them, set clear expectations about what you're going to do to help improve things, maybe not personally, but you as a company. And that has to be part of the plan for success. If that is genuinely getting in the way of them making progress, you have to incorporate that as a gating factor. However, sometimes customers do get obsessed by certain issues and think that it's the end of the world and they're at a standstill. But with a little bit of kind of lateral thinking, there are things that they could be doing despite those issues remaining that would still generate value. And it may be that value that's generated helps kind of mitigate some of the frustration from the issues themselves. So that's something else to think about. Is there are there ways that I can kind of silo those issues and kind of treat them as their own separate plan to resolve, but also have a parallel plan that is a value creation plan alongside. So that's a great question. If anyone else has got suggestions on how they've dealt with those type of meetings, I'm always interested. Tara, great question. Does the EBR evolve with the length of the client relationship? Well, hopefully it gets easier because if you're doing it right, then your customer should become more and more bought in to the value it brings and actually see it as an incredibly important part of their relationship with you. And start to invest more and more of their own time in advance to ensure that the time together is spent on the things that really, require people to be together at the same time in the same room or on the same call. So, I think you'll see EBRs become, more smoother, more predictable as people get into a groove of how they work and how to work together. They'll probably, start raising the bar, of course, as they've been working with you for longer. There's probably the low-hanging fruit in terms of value delivery are probably being picked. And you're then probably thinking, about more complex topics and how can it gets a little incrementally harder to deliver the same amount of value. So you're going to have to work harder as well. But you know, an EBR is done right is actually such a rewarding event for both sides, that, you know, as that relationship and people get more used to doing them together, that you'll probably spend a bit of the EBR thinking about, like, how can we make this meeting even more valuable, right? It's great, but, you know, let's bring ideas to the table about other ways we could use this time. You know, other topics that we can include, and actually get your customers' input and ideas. Okay, what's the next question? Suggestions about how to make EBRs more scalable, so more customers can benefit from this type of conversation, but we have a limited number of people. Yeah, great question, Angela. So, yeah, this comes down to kind of the average contract value question. How do we, if you've got a customer whose contract value is $5,000 a year, you know, if you're on a kind of maybe an SME type audience, your EBR is going to look very different to that of an enterprise level customer. Now, does that mean an EBR shouldn't happen? No, it doesn't. But does that mean an EBR should look different? Yes, absolutely. It may be a different frequency, right? So it may be annually versus quarterly. It may be a different length, like in terms of the depth of content. It may be you just have to be very careful. Think hard about the things that you're going to talk about that are going to really add value and how to do that as efficiently as possible. I think the key, when you get to that one-to-many approach, technology becomes quite important. You know, a way to extract that type of, you know, that sweeten the experience slide that I talked about. You know, the stuff that takes a bit of time, if you can automate as much of that as possible using technology, that will enable you to reduce the cost, if you like, of delivering an EBR, and so that helps with smaller customers. So if you have, you know, usage data, and maybe you're using something, you know, software to actually track that, you know, you may be able to kind of automatically generate a PowerPoint slide or a, you know, a little usage report, and that can provide a ton of value. It doesn't mean you have to email it to them, right? You can hold it back and only show them that when you actually have the EBR, but it's value and that you've created in a more automated way. And it may be that, you know, you have to kind of be a little bit more ingenious about how you extract information in advance. Maybe you can't, you know, maybe having a phone call with the champion internally for an hour beforehand doesn't work. Maybe you have to send out a little questionnaire or a little, you know, type form, kind of online form that they fill in, and then at least gives you some of the information, and then you can maybe have a 20-minute phone call to clarify some stuff or to, you know, ask some questions that are better asked over the phone. So yeah, I mean, you have to get more creative for sure, but the philosophy and the value of an EBR is obviously as important. But you know, just think about if you could double a customer who just pays you $5,000 a year, you know, you created $5,000 of value for your company, $5 additional $1,000 of value. So you've got to really think about, well, how much time and effort can I put in to create $5,000? You know, it's not going to be $10,000 worth of your time, right? So yeah, you just have to think about the return on investment. Great question, though. Well, I think we're running up on time actually, so I don't know. I think I can maybe take one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap up. You know, what best practices do you have from Shane? What best practices do you have to get an executive to set up the EBR, or to reach an executive to set up the EBR? Yeah, so I think what you're saying here is where you don't have a relationship with the executive already, and maybe you know who they are, but you don't have a relationship. Well, I mean, I think there's two suggestions I'd have. One is to obviously use your champion to encourage them to come along, make it clear why you want them there and what the value is they're going to get. that will work once, right? You can't do that and then screw up your EBR because they won't come back the second time. So, you definitely want to include that kind of some of that sweeten the experience stuff. You can even send some of that in advance, maybe to an executive level. Say, look, we're going to be discussing this in more detail in the EBR, but at a high level, I've worked out how I can, save you this amount of money, or here's a couple of highlights of stuff I've learned from how you're using the product that I think would really help you with your next whatever it is, your next campaign or your next whatever the business is doing. So maybe tease out a little bit, give them a little teaser for some value in advance. And if you obviously can get a phone conversation with them, that's better, and deliver that value over the phone. Start to build up a little bit of rapport with them. Make it clear you don't expect them to know. Maybe they can only join for half the meeting. Well, it's not ideal, but it may be good enough, right, just to get that relationship going. So if they push back on the time involvement, maybe say, well, I'd like to come for the first 30 minutes because we're going to discuss some of the more strategic pieces. I'd love to have your input, make sure that we're designing a plan for you that is aligned with your own goals and priorities. So yeah, those are some of the things that have worked for me in the past. Great. Well, I think we're at time. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming along. It's been great to talk to you, and please email me, james.scott@csmpractice.com, or follow me on Twitter at UKJamesScott, and I'd love to talk more with you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James. Really great. Thanks to everyone who came. The feedback and the engagement is incredibly positive. I know we didn't have time to answer all the questions, but if anyone has more questions, please get in touch with CSM Practice or get in touch with us at Amity. And go ahead and download CSM Practice's QBR checklist on their website. It's definitely going to be very helpful for your next QBRs. And yeah, going forward, we'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone shortly by the end of tomorrow with all the slides and the recording. And also in 2 weeks from now, on September 21st at 7 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we're having our next webinar with our CEO, Paul Phillips. So it's 10 best practices to add automation to your customer success process. So it's definitely another great topic. And yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, James, for this incredible presentation. And thank you to everyone who came. Really incredible engagement from everyone. And yeah, don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any more questions, and have a great end of your day, everyone. Thank you.